Hello everyone and welcome back to Baron's Den for a new series of videos looking at starting rosters. My initial thought was to include them as part of a team guide. I started putting one together for the Necromantic Horror and it was going to be way too long. Plus a few people have requested roster videos, so I thought I'd separate the roster videos out from the rest of the guide and concentrate the rest of the guide and perhaps more on player guides, player progression type things. Which also means I can get these out a bit quicker than I could. I want to give the guides a bit longer, so I've had a chance to digest the rules a bit more and to look into the to some games. So let's get into some Necromantic Horror starting rosters. Let's begin with out of the box rosters. So I believe, if I've done my calculations correctly, the roster that I think would be probably the most effective would be your roster A here, which is 4 zombie linemen, 2 ghouls, 2 wraiths, 2 flesh golems, 1 werewolf, and 2 rerolls. That is pretty much the standard roster that you could always do. But with the savings that that the newer roster has made, sorry, the new rules have created, it means that you've actually got 40k left. So there's a couple of things you could do with that. The 3 things that you'd be looking to do is either you could get another zombie, go for a 12th player. You could not spend it and hang on to that cash as a bit of a boost to save up for that second werewolf. Or you could put it into dedicated fans to help generate more money in the future. I think depending on the length of the league you're going to be playing in, or whatever the format you're playing would perhaps dictate which of those you want to do. I don't think they need an extra zombie because should you be a player down, you're going to get a loner zombie anyway. If you're playing in a really bashy league, you might want one, I suppose, just in case you go down a couple of players within the match. But on the whole, I think doing something with the money is probably going to make more sense. That's certainly how I'd start off in a ladder format or in a league format, because I think you can get away with not having both werewolves. And if I'm honest, all my experience of playing Necro, werewolves are my favourite players in the game. They are brilliant, but they're a bit of a liability until they get block. And having 2 of those to manage with their no block frenzy, I think you don't necessarily need them to begin with. So use the one, get the one up to block, and when you've got that first werewolf up to block, get your second werewolf. And I think you can handle one unreliable werewolf, but not 2. Plus, you need all the other players. The other players are so useful on this team. You need the ghoul runners for their movement and ability to carry the ball. You need the wraiths because of their block ability and also their ability to frustrate enemy offense. Same with the flesh golems. They stand firm means, and their strength 4 means they are linchpins of the team really. Whereas your werewolf is your stardust that you just have to manage without in the early few games. But so all of that comes in the box. You'd have a spare zombie, which I said you could spend on. But of course, this is out of the box roster. So actually, if you to spend that 40k that you've got on a zombie, you've got to go and find a lineman. So actually, that's worth bearing in mind as well. This works as an out of the box roster. But if you have only got the box, then you'll have to plough the rest of your cash either into dedicated fans or into your treasury to buy your werewolf later on. But then we've got roster B. Now this is if you're determined to run 2 werewolves, and only the 1 flesh golem. So I've still got 2 rerolls. In fact, everything's the same except you've got only 30k left over because you've spent a bit more on the having 2 werewolves as opposed to having 2 flesh golems. So yeah, I wouldn't do this one. I think having 2 flesh golems is really important. I did try a fumble league once where I went with something like this, and I've just missed the flesh golem. I missed his strength, missed his high armor, and his ability to stand firm. And I've just felt like having 2 werewolves straight out the gate can be quite hard to manage. So I wouldn't go for this, but it is another option if you really wanted your 2 werewolves to start with. And then we've got roster C, which again is the one way to have 2 werewolves and 2 flesh golems. You're very close to 1 million here, but this time you're down to 1 wraith. And again, it's so important to have that starting block on this team because nobody else has it. I definitely wouldn't recommend this one, but if you were determined to try and run both flesh golems and both werewolves, then it's got to be the Wraith you lose out on. There is obviously another build where you lose a Ghoul, but I think losing a Ghoul... in fact, no, it wouldn't actually work, would it? If you lost the Ghoul, you'd be over 1 million then. So no, those are the three, I think, if you want 2 rerolls. Of course, there is a fourth where you can drop a reroll. Oh, that should say 1 reroll. Ignore that. That says 1. I'm going to put my mouse cursor there so you can't see it. So that would be 1 reroll. So this roster D, you can have your full positionals, 3 zombie linemen. You get a zombie lineman spare as well for your loner, that if you ever need it, or if you ever want to go to a 12th man. This is all in the box, but you only get the 1 reroll. So it gives you all the goodies, all the toys, but it gives you 30k starting cash, which you suppose you could put into dedicated fans. But now you're saving up 140 for that second reroll. And I've managed to successfully run Necro in tournaments and leagues with 2 rerolls, but it's a challenge. So trying to do it with 1 reroll, I think it's too hard. So out of those out of the box rosters, I would go to roster A. Still think it's the best way to start. And of course, you can start saving up for that second werewolf, and hopefully by the time you have saved up for that, you've already picked up block on your first werewolf then. Okay, so are there any other league rosters that we could consider that you aren't necessarily out of the box ones, but if you've managed to pick up a few linemen, what else can you do? Well, the other one I want to look at is 3 rerolls, and in order to get the third reroll, it does mean dropping a flesh golem into a zombie. So this gives you a very solid platform from rerolls point of view, but you are now losing 2 of your key players. So again, I wouldn't recommend this one. But if you really wanted to start off with the 3 rerolls, this is pretty much what you're gonna have to do. You could lose a Wraith or a Ghoul, I think. Yes, you could, and get the flesh golem back. So you could run 2 flesh golems and 1 Wraith and 2 Ghouls, or 1 Ghoul, 2 Wraiths, 2 flesh golems. So you can have any combination of that. You might even be able to go 2 werewolves. 2 werewolves, 1 flesh golem, 1 Wraith, 2 Ghouls. That's another option. But I think in all those cases that having that third reroll isn't going to make up for losing that ability on the pitch. But another option should you want to start with the 3 rerolls. Okay, so looking at some tournament rosters now. This is basically, I've got a tournament coming up next year with using the new rules, and I'm looking at 1,150,000 because I think that's where tournaments may start at. It's where it's similar to, I think, is it to Arena currently? And I imagine that Necro are going to fall into a tier that probably allows them to spend this. There is talk that some tournaments might reduce the money given, so you might have to flex from this. But let's see what I've got. So first of all, I've got 3 linemen, 2 ghouls, 2 wraiths, 2 flesh golems, and 2 werewolves, which gives me a full team of 11, which is really good. I can afford 3 rerolls, and I'd still had 40k left to spend, so I did throw in an extra zombie because I can't get anything better than that. I can't get a keg, I can't get anything else really, so it made sense to just spend all the money I've got because there's no other inducement I can get, and have that 12th man. Then the skills I'd be looking to put on, I'd always put block on my werewolves. Now this is on the understanding that you've got 6 skills to spend. I've gone for 6 primaries. I don't think you need necessarily a secondary for Necromantic. They've got good primary access as it is. If the elite skill tax comes in, I'm not picking more than 4 of the same skill, so I'm okay in that regard. So I've got a block ghoul who will be acting as my ball carrier, so I want him to have block and dodge. Guard wraith. I think guard on the wraith is really important because their sidestep foul appearance combination means that you can keep guard in a really good place. Tackle, I think, is going to be really important in this edition because Amazons are a menace. The stunted teams might be a menace. So I think having at least 1 tackle player is good, and I think it makes sense to put that on the wraith. Unfortunately, it does mean I've got a flesh golem with nothing on because I've only got 6 skill points to spend, and on the one that I have got, I've put guard. But I'd be pretty happy with that going into a tournament. Of course, if you were playing the match play, Games Workshop's rules, so if you're playing at Warhammer World or you are playing a tournament that's decided to take on the GW's match play guide, which I know a lot of people said that people won't use the Games Workshop one, but I've got to mention it because it's in the book. That would actually give you 2 more skills to spend because they have 8 skill points, and I'd be looking at mainly primaries. So at that point, then I could get guard on the second flesh column, and I could put wrestle on the ghoul. And the reason I do that is it's an additional player. It gives him a bit more protection from getting hit, but also that's quite useful against players who've got block. Yeah, it's just an alternative. I've got tackle, I've got wrestle. Okay, they're not on the same player. That would be great, but I haven't got. There's a lot of tournaments that won't allow you to stack, and even if they do, there might be other better stacking options than wrestle tackle, for example. So that's just the match play variant of my original. Now another match play variant that you could look at, that I think I did this with Arena a couple of seasons ago when I managed to achieve the Arena with the Necromantic team. I actually had dodge on a Wraith, which was really useful. Of course, that would cost you 2 skill points. That's why I've gone down to just 7 skills. So the ghouls lost wrestle, and this Wraith doesn't have guard now, but he does have dodge, and that makes him really infuriating to hit because he's a blodger with sidestep and foul appearance. So he's an absolute nightmare, and it can just mean that you can keep him in dangerous situations, glued to ball carriers, glued to corners of cages, and it can be a real headache for your opponent to deal with. Now, I'm not saying I'd do this again, just showing you as another option should you get a secondary to spend. I think one of the only secondaries I'd consider is dodge. Of course, if you could stack, you might consider Mighty Blow on the werewolf, but I don't think there's many tournaments that allow you to stack a secondary. So obviously, like Mighty Blow claws would be lovely, wouldn't it? But no, I think dodge is the one I'd consider on the Wraith. Now, that's really it for the tournaments that I'd consider, the tournament builds I'd consider. However, it'd be remiss for me to not talk about star players and see if there's some interesting star player builds that you could have. Now, with most tournaments, they won't let Necro have star players, probably. But again, looking at the match play guide, they apparently cost 2 skill points to have a star player on a Necromantic Horror team. So again, if this was Warhammer World or a tournament that happened to use the match play guide, you would be able to use a star player. So I thought it'd be interesting just to look at which star players you could have and what that was going to cost you. So we'd start with Wilhelm Chaney because he is the best Necromantic star player. Sylvanian Spotlight star player. I am biased because I love Wilhelm Chaney. I love werewolves. So what you'd be looking to do here is you're upgrading one of your werewolves into Chaney, and essentially you're losing a flesh column in order to get him in. You do need a 12th man because obviously he can't count as one of your starting 11, which is why you're now up to 5 zombies. But obviously if it was the match play guide, you'd still have 6 skill points to spend. So actually I've lost the werewolf and the flesh column, which are the 2 positionals I might consider skills on. So I've managed to put skills on everyone else. I think I'd miss my flesh golem, to be honest. I'm not sure if losing a flesh golem is worth upgrading one werewolf to Wilhelm. But it's nice to know you could run him, and you'd still be fairly competitive with all of this. And now he's an absolute nightmare to deal with his wrestle, his strength 4, so he can one-on-one a lot of players should the need come up. He's got frenzy, so he's another scary surfing machine. And obviously it does leave you a little bit of cash to flex somewhere or the other. So you could promote a Wraith to a flesh column, I think. Maybe even a ghoul to a flesh column. So there are a few alternatives you can do for that, but that's basically what it's going to cost you. Now this is if you had to, if it was costing you 2 points and the tournament was only giving you 6 skill points, as it were. Then this is what I'd be looking. I'd still need my block ghoul, and I definitely want block on a werewolf. And then it's whatever else you think you could use. And I think I'd want the 2 wraiths to have tackle and guard to give me a bit of guard, but also that important tackle to take out some dodgy Amazons. Okay, the Ivan build. So Ivan, it's a similar situation. I've swapped in Ivan, but because Ivan's more of a replacement for a Wraith than he is for a Werewolf, this time I've still lost a Flesh Golem, but I've got 2 Werewolves now. I've lost a Wraith because Ivan's taken the place of the Blitzer. And it also means that I don't need Tackle because Ivan comes with Tackle, and he comes with Strip Ball as well. So he's very useful at ball sacking, so I haven't got to worry so much about having it on another player, which is why I've been able to go block, and then guard on the Wraith and block on my Ghoul Runner Ball Carrier. So that's the Ivan build. Obviously, this one a bit more expensive, so you can't do much in the way of flexing. Why is that more expensive when Ivan is cheaper? It's because I've got a Werewolf, not a Wraith. That'll be why. Okay, so on to the Gretchen build. So I haven't got to Gretchen yet in my star players, but it's clear that Gretchen might be a little bit more viable than she used to be because she's not a ridiculous cost. And being a Wraith, I'm looking at her as again a replacement for a Wraith. So similar to the Ivan build, it's 2 ghouls, 1 Wraith, 1 fleshy, 2 werewolves. But because she's cheaper, you've actually got 45 that you can flex players around with. So you could turn any of these into a extra Wraith, into an extra Flesh Golem. So there are things that you can do. You might even be able to lose a Werewolf and get a Wraith and a Flesh Golem potentially. I don't know. No, I don't think you could quite go that far. But obviously you've got 45k extra to spend that you could change a few bits and bobs. That is if you think Gretchen is worth it. The scroll build, if you were determined to have a thrower in your team, as you can see, you can actually fit him in, and you get 2 of everything except for the Flesh Golem. So you're losing a Flesh Golem and gaining Scroll. Not entirely sure that is worth it, but we shall see. Somebody might be able to make it work. It's certainly an option if you want to go for that guaranteed, well, not guaranteed, virtually guaranteed throw down the line. It's an option. And finally, the Luther build. Obviously, Luther is extortionate, so you are losing stuff for Luther. You're losing a reroll, you're losing a Werewolf, and you're losing a Wraith. Those are the players I've picked. And at 1,145, you can't do much in the way of flexing. But it does give you 2 strength 4, well, 2 strength 4 and a strength 5 piece. You've still got 1 Werewolf to do some business. And because Luther's got block, you've got a number of block pieces here, haven't you? So, not necessarily terrible. And Luther is one hell of a player, so worth considering if you could, if you're allowed to use your stars. And that, I think, is it then. So those are the rosters you're looking at. I've started with Necromantic deliberately because it's the team I know the best. But also, it's quite easily picks itself because you've only got 2 of most things, and you can pretty much afford most things. It's just varying which one player you leave behind in a league, perhaps, or whether you go less on rerolls. And then in tournaments, it's you get pretty much everything you want. But if you want to try a star player out, you've then got to make sacrifices. So I hope that was useful for people who are looking for the roster videos. Obviously, more will be coming out. These take a little bit longer to put together than some of the other videos I've done, so I'm not sure they'll be as regular as some of the others, but every now and then I'll try and release another one so we can build up these roster videos so people can see what they can play straight out the gate and then perhaps what they can take to tournaments. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Keep up the likes and the comments. I've really appreciated them all. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you very much. Bye for now.